Hi, this is Lee Balcom, the Internet's leading marriage expert, here to talk about the top 10 ways to not save your marriage, and in true David Letterman style, number 10, do nothing. Don't worry, the crisis, problem, situation, incident, threat, etc. will pass. The old bury your head in the sand approach. The reality is, it is very unlikely that the crisis will simply pass. Let's be honest. Over time, this strategy builds up more and more resentment. Then finally, everything falls apart. You can act surprised at that point, but you will know deep down inside that you ignored things way too long. It is a cumulative effect, a marriage crisis. Rarely is there one precipitating event that suddenly ends the marriage. Instead, it is a problem ignored that adds to all the other problems ignored, which finally creates so much frustration that the house of cards falls. So the first useless strategy, just do nothing. Number 9, refuse to get any outside help. Who needs it? You can do this yourself. When you're in the middle of a marriage crisis, it is not time to figure it out. One of my favorite quotes is from Albert Einstein. He says the same level of thinking that created the problem will not solve the problem. In other words, when we only use the thought processes that led us into trouble, we will not find a way out of the problem. We all get stuck in our thought patterns. Once we establish them, we don't change much. Think about it. Don't all of your spousal arguments basically follow the same pattern? Doesn't your daily routine pretty much all go the same way? We like sameness, and a change is a bit of a threat. Even the painful sameness is better than the unknown. At least that's what we tend to believe. Problem is, we find ourselves stuck, and without outside help and information, nothing will change, even if you want it to. Number 8, grab some free advice. Hey, free is good, right? Almost always, free advice is worth about that. Nothing. When you are injured, do you seek out some free advice on that injury? Or when you need some legal advice, do you just get some free advice? So why, when your most important relationship is on the line, would you just try to use some free advice? Look, we live in a transaction society. We make trades and transactions to get what we don't have. And knowledge is no different. People who give away advice are rarely giving away anything worthwhile. The real question is, if free is your goal, how much do you really treasure your relationship? If I told you how to save $20,000 instantly, would you pay me for that advice? Well, that's the minimal cash value of your failed marriage. In other words, a divorce in the U.S. averages $20,000. Save your marriage, save $20,000. These days, that'd be a good idea. And what about having a wonderful, loving, peaceful marriage? What is the worth of that? Really, what price would you put on that? I ask because I know of plenty of people who think nothing of grabbing a $4 coffee drink every day, grab a couple of $3 packs of cigarettes every day, a 30 bottle of wine on the weekend or even during the week, subscribe to a $100 cable system, blah, 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 blah. Then when they go looking for advice to save their marriage, they want to find some free advice. It is always about value and the value you place on your marriage. Free advice? Probably more costly than you ever realize in the long run. Number 7, get some good books, then leave them on the bookstand. Maybe your spouse will at least think you're doing something. We authors don't like to admit this, but statistics show that upwards of 80% of self-help books that are bought are never read. Imagine that. The answer may be right there. You took the time to get a resource, either because the cover looked nice, somebody recommended it, or because you were desperate. Then onto the bedstand it goes. Underneath the magazines, the daily paper, that good novel, then suddenly it is lost. The very bit of information that could save your marriage, stuck at the bottom of a stack, never to be read. Sound familiar? If so, time to dust off the information and give it a read. At least give it a chance. You've already invested your money in it. Why not give it a test drive? Number 6, read the information, but then don't do anything. It won't work in your situation anyway. Okay, so you dusted off that information and even read it, but then you took no action. Maybe the information seemed impossible, far-fetched, too easy, too complicated, or just dead wrong. Now, you do need to use your better judgment, but perhaps it is worth a try. If it's just no good, set it aside, but at least think about giving it a try. What you've been doing has clearly not gotten you the results you wanted, so perhaps it is time to try something new. Sometimes new thinking seems foreign and unnatural, but is really like anything new. Repetition builds skill. What seems awkward begins to feel more natural. Suddenly, what seemed impossible seems elementary. Again, remember Einstein's quote, "Doing what you've done hasn't gotten you what you want. What's the risk of trying something different? Number 5, get bad information from unqualified sources. Hey, any information is better than no information, right? As you've already discovered, there are lots of experts willing to take a buck or tell you how to save your marriage. But be sure your expert is really just that. At a minimum, make sure they actually have some training, not just their own experience. Now, they don't have to have a PhD, but if they can't tell you about their training other than been there, done that, move on. Experts are experts because they have worked in the field, received training, and have some ideas on how to help you. The others are experts in marketing. Be sure and distinguish between the two. Remember way back when the barbers who cut the hair were also the doctors of the village? They weren't trained, caused lots of damage, but that was the only choice. Well, we don't live in the Wild West anymore, and there are plenty of real experts, and you can get to them very easily. Get their advice and avoid the damage of the well-meaning but ill-equipped experts in marketing. Number 4, do everything at once. Hey, if a little is good, a lot is better, right? Wrong. Many marriages have suffered from neglect far too long until one day someone wakes up and says, enough. Then the other person jumps into high gear. They try to make date nights, meaningful conversations, do the housework, get another job, just about anything to make it work. Instead, pick a couple of things. Be consistent with them and try a slow approach, not a panicked approach. Building from zero takes some time, but if you try the everything at once approach, you will scare your spouse away. Number 3, argue, beg, plead, and show your emotions. Surely your spouse will see your sincerity in wanting to save the marriage. Now, this is a very common situation. You see, we are all master script writers, often ready for Hollywood, at least in our minds. We assume a spouse will see the wisdom of our logic, emotions, begging, and pleading. Problem is, they're working off a different script that they're writing in their mind. If I throw someone a rope, and when they grab it I start pulling, their reflex is to pull back, matching power with power. It's no different in verbal tug-of-war. The harder I try to convince someone of something counter to what they have said, the reflex of that person is to become even more entrenched in the belief that they have. So the arguing, the reasoning, the begging, the pleading have the opposite effect and actually hasten the dissolution of the relationship. Number 2, let your spouse know your theory about how this is really about their issue. Then they will see how unhealthy they are. Now, here's how to throw even more gas on the fire. When your spouse says that he or she wants to leave, point out how it is A, their midlife crisis, B, that they are never satisfied, C, really about their dysfunctional family, D, some other diagnosis you read about or saw on Oprah or Dr. Phil. Now, you may be dead on. You may know exactly what's wrong with them. The problem is you're not going to be seen as an objective provider of a diagnosis. Instead, you will only be strengthening the sense of frustration that your spouse is feeling. Diagnosis is best done, if at all, by an impartial outside expert or by one's own self. And number 1, try to prove how much you need them. Surely just seeing that they are needed will get them to stay. This is the last bad strategy I'm going to name because neediness is never attractive. And when someone wants to leave, feeling the neediness only throws fuel on the fire. People want to be wanted, but not desperately needed. And in the midst of a crisis, the last thing someone wants is to feel manipulated. I've seen people threaten to kill themselves to prove how much they need the other person. I've seen people refuse to pay bills, eat, take care of the kids, take care of the house, etc., etc., etc. And in every case, the person who wants out says, see, this is what I've been saying. It's hard to argue with that. Being needy is never attractive, and is even more so when someone wants nothing more than to be needed, than to not be needed. Well, that's my top 10 list of how not to save a marriage while trying to save it. I could go on with many more things that I've seen. I think I've seen every possible mistake made. My hope is not to discourage you, but that you at least make the correct moves that you need to in order to save your marriage. If you're really interested in how to save your marriage, I hope you won't make these mistakes, and I hope you'll learn by going to www.savethemarriage.com. That's www.savethemarriage.com.